Hello and welcome to another episode of Sansad TV, and in this episode we are looking at the appointment of the Chief of Defence Staff, much anticipated for many months after the unfortunate demise of the first CDS, General Bipin Rawat, and we have somebody who is now the CDS, who the considered opinion in informed military circles is a very good man for the job and perhaps the right man for the right job, despite the fact of him having been brought back from retirement. But while in retirement, the CDS was working very closely with the National Security Advisor, so was not out of the loop, if one would use a term like that. But we have two experts who understand both the placement of officers at higher echelons of command and decision making, and somebody who has been involved with the deep process of integration of the three services. We have General Satish Dua with us, who was earlier not just a Corps Commander in Kashmir, but also the Chief of the Integrated Service Headquarters, where commonly referred to as CISC. And we have General Hasnain, well-known commentator and also a former Corps Commander in Kashmir. And equally important to this subject, he was the Military Secretary. And the Military Secretary, for those who don't know, is the man who's responsible for the career building and the appointments and the growth of officers in the service. So I'll start with you, General Hasnain, sir. General Chauhan obviously has, to my understanding, ticked all the boxes on the way to the top. What really tipped the balance in his favor for the government to appoint him as CDS?
Thank you, Maroof. Thank you for inviting me for this very, very important discussion today. As jumping to your question straight, yes, if I had to select someone from a spectrum of talent available at the higher levels today, retired or otherwise, I too would have put my finger to General Chauhan. And I am saying this in the capacity as an ex-military secretary. What swung the pendulum towards him? Number one, his range of appointments, which he has done, and the experience which he has gained. Of course, the basic talent is all there. He's been the DGMO. He's been in Kashmir as the GOC of the Dagger Division, the Chief of Staff with General Satish Dua himself. He's been the Corps Commander in Dimapur in the Northeast, so he's got a China orientation. He's been the Army Commander, Eastern Command, DGMO, which is one of the most important appointments. So he's ticked off all the boxes. I would say as a personality, yes, he's a no-nonsense man, understands the larger picture extremely well, and is not afraid of speaking his mind. I think this 1 year gap, or about 8 or 9 month odd gap, which has had taken place after his retirement, has been very, very substantially used by the government by appointing him as the military advisor with the NSA, and I think that really should have swung it in his favor. So altogether, I would say this is just the right choice.
Okay, seems to me also, having met the general once or twice in my career in the army, but General Dua sir, I want you to elaborate a bit on one of the points you had written about, and that is the balancing act that the CDS has to do between not just dealing with the three service chiefs and the integration, but the bigger wall that exists near his office, and that is the MOD. And as Secretary of the DMA, how is it that he is going to be able to get past the barriers that have always existed, and in the absence of General Bipin Rawat, perhaps gave the time to the bureaucracy once again to firm up their response against non-military activity in their turf, this is a challenge that him and any CDS would face. How would they overcome that?
Thank you, Maroof, for inviting me for this very important discussion. Like I've written also in one of my articles, I think we all talk about theaterization, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, a little later, but we talk about theaterization, integration between the services. But I feel, like you rightly mentioned, there is a bigger challenge, and that challenge is integrating between different organs within the Ministry of Defence before we step out to integrate with other instruments of power outside the military. Here, like you rightly said again, that we have to break down these walls between the Ministry of Defence, that is Department of Defence and other departments, and the military. For long, we, that is Army, Navy, Air Force, have been attached headquarters, not really a part of the Ministry of Defence. Whereas by raising a Department of Military Affairs, we have actually become a part of the Ministry of Defence as one another department. Now, what has happened is that this is a department that was evolving, that has started to take charge of the mandate that it was given. But after the demise of CDS, the first CDS, General Rawat, after the tragic incident, 8 or 9 months have elapsed. And during this time, some more friction has developed. Now, things were not the same, and everyone lamented the fact that we didn't have the CDS, because it's like raising a baby without a father. It is very important that we continue to smoothen our processes. So that is one challenge that he has to face closer home, close to his office. And like General Hasnain said, I think with his vast experience, I'm talking of General Chauhan now, the CDS, with his vast experience in different fields and different walks of life, and especially his understanding as the military advisor to the NSA, his understanding of larger than just the military or the MOD things should stand him in good stead to break down these walls or to lessen the friction.
Yes, I think his biggest assets at this point of time, apart from his own experience and career profile, would be the fact that he has friends at the right places in the government structure, and that I'm sure those who intend to stymie some of his efforts would know that at the end of the day it will get pushed through, which is to go back to the American experience of the Goldwater Act, where various issues, the inter-service sensitivities people were holding on to and arguing, my turf is more important than yours and hence I'm not giving in. Sir, a question that has been coming up again and again is that, and it was a bit visible in the time of General Rawat also, you know, when the adversary comes up and faces you head on, Chinese in the LAC, Pakistan has been a perennial adversary. People were questioning the role of the CDS versus the service chiefs and the fact that the CDS was overshadowing the service chiefs. But from what I've understood, the CDS's job is to be the permanent chairman of the Chiefs of Staff Committee. So he, perforce, is senior to them. Your view?
Maroof, that's a very, very good question. There's no doubt. At the time of April 2020, when we were facing the very adversarial situation in Ladakh, the CDS, the appointment of the CDS was 4 months old. And I think it was still evolving. It is still evolving, for that matter. And these structures and what the ultimate outcomes are going to be is still very uncertain, because we are still in discussion stage. But yes, this issue is a very important issue. You found that the 3 chiefs were there, and the government had access to them to take advice in their different domains, but they now had a CDS. And I think it was being experimented, if nothing else, that here we've got that single window advice which we have been always seeking. Earlier, the chairman chiefs of staff committee was virtually an informal appointment. But here was something, it was rotational as it is, here is something appointed by the government of India with this particular prime responsibility of integration. And so what he carries to the government is an integrated advice, which he probably filters through, discusses with his advisors and brings it to the Prime Minister or to the Government of India and advises them on it. If the Government of India so wishes to seek specialized advice, focused advice on any particular domain, they have all the freedom, all the flexibility to go back to any of the chiefs if they so wish to do it.
Right.
So I do think this was a very important phase in which we probably learned some lessons, and I'm surprised as to why people had such objections to this, because as I said, this is an evolving program movement which is going on at the moment, and eventually the outcomes will speak for themselves.
Okay. So, in fact,
in a bit, just to add to what General Hasnain has said on this single point military advice.
Yeah.
I was a member of Chief of Staff Committee myself. So the difference was in a rotating chairman. Since there's a rotational chairman, if there was a difference of opinion, we could only submit a unanimous advice to the leadership, whether it be the defense minister or the prime minister. If there was a difference of opinion, all the chiefs were mandated to carry their differences to the high table. Now that means what? That means that the implication is you are abdicating the decision then to a non-military mind of the higher leadership. With this, CDS being responsible for a single point military advice, it means that if the differences can't be sorted out, he is well within his purview. In fact, he is mandated to give his opinion, his advice to the leadership, and that's a single point military advice. Now, last sentence I want to add, which is very important, is that it does not cut out the rest of the advisors. Exactly. It only enriches them. It is only when there is a point of difference that the leadership can seek a distilled military advice. Yet the decision will be taken by the leadership, but I think this makes the process a little more enriched.
Yeah, just quickly to add to what you are saying, and this whole thing about single point military advice seems to also have created a bit of a concern or controversy at some levels. That does it mean, and this is a fear that has been in for some time amongst the service chiefs, that their military advice won't count?
That's exactly what I said. Their military advice will count and will be sought. It is only when a difference of opinion comes into a degree where I know I'm repeating myself, that is the time leadership looks for a military advice, and not the decision is not just left to the leadership to take.
Okay. If I may add, Maroof, just a sentence. Business rules must never come in the way of national interests.
1961.
You see, at the end of the day, you may create any rules, you may create any kind of structures, but national interest is what matters. So the government of India is free to ultimately go back to whoever it wishes. It may not be the service chiefs, it could go to anyone else, it can go to academia to come back with the best advice that it feels that it needs to get.
Okay. Now, I want to go back to General Dua. And General Dua, there is a point that you have talked about, and this is, there is a need in the service headquarters to prepare for next generation warfare. I mean, integration, all the structural arrangements, etc., all leads us to that. Isn't this an ongoing process anyway in the services because of the amount of academic work and thinking that takes place in places right from the Defence Services Staff College to the NDC and beyond?
True, it is. I don't deny that. And that is why I think it becomes more or it is incumbent on the new CDS to take this upon himself as a bigger challenge. And why do I say that? It is only 2 years ago that we have created the cyber agency, the space agency, and an armed forces special operations division. Now, when we say future ready, so there are different aspects to it, but continuing with this discussion, we are talking of how the cyber warfare, the information warfare is going to be integrated. In these emerging fields, there are no boundaries between civil and military, let alone between the three services. So it is, I think, very important that this challenge is understood, not only capability building, not only Atmanirbharta, and there are so many other challenges, but this aspect has to, in the coming days, in hybrid warfare, grey zone warfare. This aspect has to be in the forefront of his mind, and that's what I've written.
May I add one line to
Bully.
this? You see, I think your audience also needs to know that this process that we are looking at today, next generation warfare, isn't something which we are doing today.
Yes.
In 2003, we started the whole process of transformation. It's back in 2003 that the word transformation was started being used in the Indian Army. And somehow for the next 11 or 10, 11 years, we never heard anything at the government level of absorption of these proposals that we were making at that time. All this was happening at that particular time. But somehow this came to the fore only subsequently when a larger understanding of the new strategic culture started emerging. So as you are very right, this is an ongoing thing at all times. It's a question of how it is taken at the higher strategic levels.
Okay. Now, I need to move a little away from that into 2 or 3 other challenges that I feel that the CDS and his office faces. One is to fulfill the government's desire to Indianize the Indian armed forces further, which means to shed colonial legacies, which means to shed lots of things that the civilians, both in the South Bloc and beyond, are not able to comprehend. That what is the need, we are all infantrymen, what is the need for bagpipers, what is the need for a colonel of the regiment when there is a colonel who is a commanding officer, what is the need for certain regiments continuing to have very strong emotional linkages to pre-47 history as in post-47 history. How do you think somebody who is a Gurkha officer and they do not have all the traditions that non-Gurkha regiments have, how do you think he will be able to get that message across down the line and to the political establishment?
Very interesting question, no doubt. But if I may start by saying, this unique culture which the Indian armed forces, and I won't say the Indian army, the Indian armed forces have been able to build up over a period of time, retain a lot of good of what they inherited in terms of colonial legacy, but substantially add much more to it from the Indian aspect, the Indian culture, Indian experience, etc. The hybrid model has been an outstanding example actually. Today we are at a stage where this is being questioned. Because primarily outside, I think we have not been able to take the rest of the people along with us to understand this. This unique culture is really understood within the armed forces itself. How to sell this outside, make this a part of our national strategic culture, we have really not succeeded in doing so. So we are at a very, very crucial stage at the moment where we cannot really define. I think this is going to take a fairly long time. It's not that a question, some direction has been given today that we have to Indianize immediately. The Indian armed forces are Indianized completely. Our system of war fighting is Indianized. Our culture is Indianized. Our words of command on parade are completely
Greetings are Indianized.
Everything is Indian.
Yes.
It's just that the overall, maybe some issues of style, some issues of legacy continue to inspire. And that I don't think really should be questioned.
I'm with you completely on that, sir. General Duas, you have talked about the need for the CDS to integrate the private sector with the DPSUs and a whole lot of other initiatives for the Make in India initiatives. Now, what is it that he can do new which has not been thought of or is not happening?
Look, Maroof, I think firstly for too long we have relied on the public sector in the field of defense industry. In the last few years, a beginning has been made. Strategic partnership scheme, many other innovations being incentivized schemes, the defense corridors being opened in 2 different parts of the country, and so on and so forth. Now, what can be done? For example, let me take the strategic partnership model in which the defense, the industry was to partner with the private industry to build big platforms, submarines, aircrafts, helicopters, etc., and for which a foreign OEM was allowed to be selected. A foreign manufacturer, big players were allowed to be selected. Now, what has happened? We've already put that thing in motion theoretically. It was done 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Yet we are yet to see us reaping any dividends of that. What I'm trying to say is that there has been a little gap between theory and practice, and I think as an integrator of not only the three services but of the processes that go towards capability building for the armed forces, I think he is the right man to be able to integrate between the three services, between the industry and the academia and the foreign manufacturers, and between the Department of Defense, DRDO and other organs that of the public sector, and bring them on the same table in our quest for Atmanirbharta.
Okay, General Hasnain sir, here is an area which is up your street completely, dealing with Pakistan. Now, China we've talked about. Pakistan doesn't go away as a nuisance and a threat. What is it that and General Chauhan has the experience, having commanded 19 Div, having been Chief of Staff in 15 Corps and MO and everything else. What is it that he can bring in as an input to the government which will help us have I would say a better calibrated Pakistan policy?
That's a very interesting aspect. First of all, I think there's a broad assumption today as if the threat from Pakistan has vaporized. That's an unfortunate assumption which is being made today, because to my mind the next cycle of global terror will probably rise from Pakistan itself again and come back. We should be prepared for it completely. So while our focus continues to remain on our northern borders, we need to, the CDS definitely needs to refocus a part of the attention of the armed forces, the government of India, back towards this threat which is there, which may not be a substantial threat at the moment in the conventional domain, or even I would say in the CI domain. But all this, the potential all remains there. And therefore, to keep it sensitized, to keep this going, and to establish that culture of understanding, this needs to be done. I think a very important aspect here is conventional warfare may take a slight backseat. And we need to now start going into some of the other domains of hybrid warfare, particularly I would say information. Information, which is probably one of our weakest links at the moment, needs to be something on which we need to build up much more. Now, these are the kind of issues the government can start paying much more attention to. The establishment of strategic culture, the prevention of the marginalization of our minorities and things like that. These are the kind of issues which Pakistan's understanding, the larger understanding of Pakistan's goals of carrying out its very famous war by 1,000 cuts in India, that must continue.
Okay, Jan Dua sir, another area which you are best placed to answer, and this is the integration of the commands. I've left the theatre command thing to the very end because I know it can be a subject of endless debate. But theatre commands must happen.
Yes.
Their time has long been overdue. China has also theatre commands, forget the US for a while. And the fact that the services have to learn to work closely together. There were also apprehensions that have been expressed by some of the services that why do we continue to have CDS only from the army? What was the background to what you once said to me that it would be 2-1-1? Please explain.
Okay, I'll just take the last part of your question first, as to why the CDS, the second CDS also is appointed from the army. And I am now a retired man, so I'm just hazarding a guess. Firstly, the first CDS, General Rawat, did not complete his term. It was less than 2 years, and that tragic incident happened when he had not yet finished 2 years. The second reason also is that in the Integrated Defence Staff Headquarters, which I was heading earlier, all our postings are done to a ratio. It is not 1-1-1 between the three services. It is dependent on the size of the forces. So, if 5 colonels are posted, then there are 3 posted from the Air Force and 2 posted from the Navy. And that's a 5-3-2 ratio that we follow as a norm, as a written down norm. So it would not be out of place to think that the CDS also, it may not always be a 1-1-1, especially in the beginning. Eventually, there will be times when the leadership will have to take a call as to who is more suited, rather than go by an empirical 1-1-1 or 2-1-1 or any such ratios. Before I end, I'll just dwell on also what you spoke about theatre commands. I think theatre commands is an idea whose time has come. It has to happen. It's a question of when and not if. In a broad sense, I won't get too much into the discussion. In a broad sense, you are placing all the resources at the disposal of a commander to tackle a mandated task. And by giving him all the resources, you are also making him very accountable. So if a theatre commander is looking at one particular adversary or one particular area, then he gets all the resources. He is responsible to the leadership for that. I think it sets in better accountability, better optimization of resources, and all in all, better war fighting in the times to come. And that's the reason why, like you said, all countries have adopted it. Even China, 5-7 years ago, has gotten into this model.
Yeah, I've been an advocate of theatre command now for 30 years.
Yes.
And I've been writing about it. And just go back in time, sir. And in Pandit Nehru's time, one of the decisions that was taken was that the power and position of the service chiefs would have to be readjusted in the order of precedence, keeping in mind the requirements of our democracy. So the Commander-in-Chief of the Army, Jangi Lat Sahab, Field Marshal Claude Auchinleck, was reduced to, later his successors were reduced to Chief of Army Staff.
Yes.
And the Navy chiefs and air chiefs were brought on par. In fact, some people don't know that even in 1962, the air chief was a 3-star officer, not a 4-star officer.
Yes.
So now all that has happened. So we are now in the next phase, and warfare and security situations demand that we have to adjust and move along. In any case, whatever turf you are holding on to, one day you will retire and somebody else takes on that turf. But thank you very much for your brilliant insights, and thank you very much for educating me, and I'm sure the audience, on so many issues that the questions have been doing the rounds with the appointment of the new CDS, but I think we are all better placed now to address them. Until our next episode, goodbye.